and welcome to the Realty Plus Budget Live, where we are going to talk about this budget which was introduced in the morning. And a lot of people are terming it as cautious, some are saying mechanical, others have appreciated it for its policy signals and fiscal priorities, while some experts are pointing out to lack of details and no direct stimulus for real estate. So now we bring to you the day's final verdict on Budget 2026 for Indian real estate. And to do so, we have expert panel, which will break down the numbers and the narratives for you. So we have with us Ajay Sharma, Managing Director, Valuation and Advisory Services, Colliers, India. Our next guest is Mr. Amit Goenka, Dr. Amit Goenka, in fact, Chairman and Managing Director, NICES Finance. Ashwinder R. Singh, Chairman, CII Real Estate Committee and Advisor to NAR India. Pranat Shah, Partner EY India Transaction Tax. Santosh Kumar, Group Vice Chairman of ANAROC. And Sridhar N., Group Director and CEO, Real Estate and Infrastructure, India, Industrial and Logistics for Hira Nandani Group. So all our eminent experts, a very warm welcome to you. And as I said earlier, given the expertise of you all, I think we have covered all aspects of this budget today. Starting the conversation, first of all, I would want to have an opening comment from all of you. In one sentence, your immediate takeaway from this budget for the real estate sector. So what's your immediate takeaway for real estate in one sentence? Ashwinder, starting from you.
Thank you, Sapna, for having me. I think this is a clear infrastructure first, stability driven budget.
Stability-driven budget. Fantastic. Mr. Goenka, your sum up of this budget.
This budget is clearly aligned to increase the pace of urbanization across tier 2, tier 3 cities without necessarily giving any direct signaling for real estate development or for the sector as a whole.
Okay, towards urbanization. Santosh, your one sentence for this budget.
Yeah, it was like Nirmala Sitharamanji mentioned, it is a Yuva Shakti driven budget. There were, three kartavyas which she has framed. One is accelerating and sustained economic growth. Second is fulfilling the aspiration of our people, young people. And third one was vision of Sabki Saath and Sabki Vikas.
Right. Ajay, your opening comment on this budget.
I think it's a very forward-looking budget in terms of planning for next 5 years on the infrastructure side, and also to balance out the regional imbalances that are there today in India from an economic growth perspective. Nothing much for real estate, but a lot of indirect impact can be definitely felt from what has been proposed today in the budget.
Okay, Pranath, what's your reading of this budget?
Yeah, so generally a little stability-driven budget overall. From a tax standpoint, a taxpayer-friendly budget, trying to simplify litigations, minimize litigations, be it on transfer pricing, APAs, and so on. And more importantly, decriminalizing so many penalties and prosecution areas. So it's that way bringing in little more confidence of the taxpayers in the tax department.
Okay, that's one good thing I've heard the entire day. Sridhar, your comment?
Thank you, Sapna. My take would be this Union budget of 2026-27 presented by our Finance Minister, Honorary Nirmala Sitharaman. I think they are given a huge push to the infrastructure with a 12 lakh crore kind of capital expenditure. And the real estate, they have captured the momentum there while advancing real estate through asset recycling and urbanized focus, because they are trying to remove the regional imbalance, as someone said. And the reactions would be, it highlights positive in a growth momentum, but we still have to live with execution risk and limited direct tax relief being given in the budget. That's my take.
Correct. Fantastic. I think we have got very good, opening sentiments of our experts on how this budget is forward-looking, stability-driven, long-term growth. Uh, there is a saying that if you want to see the success of the budget, you get to know by the stock markets. So, how do you see it? Because we saw markets immediately crashing. Is it just the volatility? Is it the direct impact of the budget? Again, let me start with Ajay. What do you feel?
So, like, I think the entire all the panelists will agree upon. I think there were a lot of expectation from direct impact. Like putting the money in your hand, kind of decisions being taken by the Ministry of Finance, but they opted for something which was like more, for a longer time vision. They went heavy on infrastructure. They committed a lot of capital in uplifting rural economics. They also put in a lot of money to revive tourism-based infrastructure, MSMEs, and those kind of things. So I think the priorities shifted from being very immediate and direct, impact to a long-term impact. And because of that, obviously, the stock markets do take that into account, immediately showed the reaction they did.
So do you think everyone had too many expectations and that's why, that was the result?
No, I don't think, Sapna, in my opinion, primarily the stock market did not give the positive response, primarily because of, transaction tax, which has been imposed on both futures and options, because of which I think there has been negative sentiment. Otherwise, I don't see, because there are many reasons for in this budget for everyone to give thumbs up. Like everyone has mentioned, there are so much of positive. More primarily, the economic fundamental is very, very strong, and we are in the safe hands. And looking at the various positive initiatives taken by the government, both on various sectors. I think every sector Finance Minister Nirmala has touched upon. There is capital allocation, which has been given to many of the sectors, which ultimately in the long term make Indian economic fundamental very, very strong, which will be more employment generation oriented. And also, when we talk about the infrastructure, I think in the long term, it's definitely going to help in creating more and more infrastructure development. So there are a lot of initiatives which will have a direct or indirect, impact. And also, some of the initiatives will have an impact in the long term on the real estate side as well.
Correct. That's right. Forward looking, as you had earlier mentioned, it's a forward looking budget. Ashwinda, do you think because there were no SOPs this time in the budget, that's why the markets reacted the way they reacted?
No, Sapna, actually, Santosh pointed out on one aspect, but today the markets have fallen more because of public sector banks, because the center has announced that they plan to borrow around 17.2 lakh crores from the market in FY 26-27, which is raising fear of upward pressure on the bond yield. So today,
Yes.
actually, State Bank of India, Canara Bank, Bank of Baroda, Bank of India, they have fallen by 8 to 9% because of this particular issue. The STT is there, but I still feel because the STT is more on the future and option market for traders. Uh, I'm sure that has an impact, as Santosh said, but these two things have kind of led to it. But I agree with Santosh absolutely on one point, Sapna. See, we have to understand real estate is a slow burn industry. It is now, and we are now moving away from incentives and moving towards strategic actions that give us long term growth and stability in real estate, because these and I think we have been talking about industry status, for example, in real estate for god knows since the time I have joined real estate.
Correct.
Decade, since 2015, I'm listening that please give industry status to real estate. This is the favorite thing for all speakers to say. But the point is, there are issues with that. And currently, the way things are working, I think Amit pointed out on tier two, tier three cities, it's a very positive step because urbanization is what is going to develop real estate. Infrastructure development is what is going to develop real estate. And I will talk more about the infrastructure aspect and everything else
Yes.
as we're discussing.
Correct.
So strategically, I feel we are going in the right direction, and we have to understand that currently we are going through a very massive geopolitical turmoil. There is so much of geopolitical turmoil that you know we the government wants to be rightfully very careful of
Correct.
what they want to say, how they want to say. And another point, Sapna, which is very important, which we need to understand is that now budget is becoming very strategic and directional, because tomorrow, say for example, if they want to do something on affordable housing, the government can announce it after the budget also. The government can change the definition of affordable housing to what we want. The rate of interest for home loans can be reduced at any point in time. Every quarter there is an opportunity to do that. So I am saying, why discuss rate of interest uh, in a budget? Because every 3 months RBI, it's more of a RBI matter than the
Yeah.
just a kind
The
of
budget
talking.
matter. Yeah. Yeah.
We are moving
Uh,
towards lot of these
Time.
actions where budget, rightfully so, 1.5 2 hours, limited directional conversation, and then we see what happens, how things are. Because see, right now it is a very big seesaw. The
correct.
FIs are withdrawing money and domestic institutions are investing money. So we
Correct.
are going to an economy where we have to now really become self sustained based on our own strength and stop looking at the outside world.
Correct, correct. Dr. Goenka, Ashwinder mentioned one thing, the geopolitical scenario. Economic survey mentioned we could have a 2008 kind of a situation, but in that also they have given a rosy picture for Indian growth outlook. How do you see these entire things playing out for India and given the background of this budget?
I think it's important to understand that while India has maintained a very neutral stance, the unpredictability of policies, especially the tax regime and things like STT and other changes or dividend policies, will have an impairment of sentiment for global investors. As Ashwin rightly put out, there has already been a pullback of capital by FIs. We need to create India as a safe haven for global capital and not just be reliant on Indian capital, because Indian capital has a limited base. We see the largest constraint between demand and supply is capital. So while we see a significant demand for asset classes, for urbanization, for the multi-utility centers, etc., but the fulfillment of those capacities is because of constraint of capital, and which is where we come in and where we fulfill. But when we do that, we see that it is very enormous chasm to fill, and that cannot be filled by domestic capital alone, because a significant portion of that is going into capital markets. Now, will that get rechannelized into real estate and alternatives overnight? Maybe not. So, what incentives is one creating to create a more uh, fundamental framework for a domestic capital to start moving towards urban infrastructure and real estate? Only public spend is not sufficient. Yes, you will unlock capital by moving CPSC assets into a REIT, and that is a very significant move of driving away inefficiencies and institutionalizing the asset class. But the unlocking of that capital is still not sufficient to really fill the entire development gap. So we will need to create huge corridors. Now, when we sign economic treaties, let's say between India and UAE, or now the European region and India, it is an intent to create multilateral business corridors. But that must also entail the enablement of new capital to walk into India and be able to drive growth, if not in the capital markets, directly into assets, directly into the development of the economy, and to into various into various economic zones. Now that is something we still need to see as a policy framework. What is being done to really create that? Like NIF was created. Now when NIF was created, it was created so that we could create an infrastructure fund body which had multilateral institutions which could pool in capital and propel the growth of private infrastructure development. Now we had Swami Fund, which was Fund One. Last year, Swami Fund Two was announced, and of course, that is a good way to actually tackle affordable housing and unbuilt assets within the housing
Correct.
space. But then, what happens on the urban infra side? Is that only a problem of housing, or we really need more? Is it only data centers? What happens to senior living? What happens to IT parks and ACZs? What happens to healthcare and education? What happens to other affordable housing in townships? So while creating of an infrastructure corridor is absolutely essential when you have a 12.3 lakh crore outlay for that, it's a 3x multiplier domestically in terms of downstream further investment, right? So you're talking of almost about 35, 40 lakh crore rupees of outcome out of that allocation because of allied sectors and downstream benefits. But then that will only be limited because it will not be having a multiplier effect with additional capital outlay through domestic
Right.
participation or global focus. I think I find that a little missing in terms of how do we rejuvenate the global uh, enterprises, the global sentiment to allow that partnerships to form. I think that clearly is important. Apart from that, I think yes, one of the dovetail effects could be when you have new ports, airports, high-speed rail corridors. You will have these local partnerships at asset level or at corridor level or at enterprise level to create these infrastructure asset classes. So I think that certainly works, but it has to be a more integrated development. Like the railway started to do smart stations and integrated stations and other facilities around
Yeah.
key nodes. So I think it has to be a more evolved thought process in terms of not just providing the infrastructure or the trunk corridors, but also developing the vicinity around that. We know how long DMIC has taken to actually build and effectuate. We're seeing the benefits of now Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor come into speed. So I think a time frame for development, B, acceleration of the ecosystem around these trunk infrastructures need to be brought in. And more importantly, the global sentiment needs to be revived. The world
Correct.
needs to be excited about the budget. I mean, as Ashwinda rightly put it, it's directional, it's strategic. But in that direction, when we announce a corridor or we announce a bilateral arrangement with certain economies, how is that playing into the thoughts of the domestic economy? What is the impact of that? Still remains unanswered. A lot of unshackling of the tax regime needs to happen. So I think there is a certain view in terms of how the country will urbanize, and that is brilliant because that's exactly what we need. We need the urbanization pace to go from less than 40% to over 60% over the next 20 years. And I think that will only happen with this directional push. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But the capital correspondingly required to achieve that is starkly missing. And we're still failing to address that.
So capital is missing, and we are failing to address that. Sridhar, there is no doubt that the intent of the budget is right, the direction is right. But as Ashwinder ji also mentioned, that the investments, how do we bring the government has increased its capital expenditure by 9%. How do we bring in the private capital? There is they have decided to do a tax holiday for data centers. Um,
Correct.
will that help bringing in more the SME growth fund, infra risk guarantee fund? Are these push factors for capital, bringing capital in the country and in the real
No,
estate?
uh, see, Amit very rightly pointed out about the global sentiment vis-a-vis the budget and the expectations that come. Normally, the budgets, normally people watch it and then look at the stock market and react. But if you see today, I mean, the last few budgets that we have seen, we are the last 10 years, they're directionally pushing ourselves to be the world's fifth largest or third largest economy going forward. But then we have to still deal with the geopolitical risk that is surrounding us today. Neither are we are part of the China bloc, neither are we part of the US bloc. China and Russia can get aligned. So India stands independently, and for that, we need to develop our growth. Thankfully, delivering on the back end of a 7.2% GDP growth, if you're talking about a 7.4%, you're directionally right. And I think today, as most of us have discussed in the panel, it's more strategic. I think we're in the right direction. The capex rise of 9% to 12.2 lakh crores and prioritizing tier one, tier two, all are right direction because we are trying to urbanize. And as you urbanize, your employment focus, your freight corridors, your waterways, starting from Orissa. I think I remember Nirmala Sitharaman talking about ship repair hubs in Varanasi, Patna. It also reduces and they're also talking about a risk guarantee fund, which probably
Yeah.
reduces the lender's risk to boost private participation, which you're talking about in
Mm.
transport and logistics. So obviously, all of these are drivers for growth in employment, in productivity, and in investments. So hopefully, these all should attract private as well as foreign investments coming in, because
Mm.
all said and done, given the inflation and given your US dollar, rupee dollar, and the rate of growth in India, India is still among the top three fastest growing economies in the globe in terms of GDP, etc. India is a vast country, so you have got huge opportunities. And I'm sure foreign money chases return. And India, after hedge, I don't know how much of that, but then they will still see India as a very big country. Like, for example, Blackstone announced a new data center of 10,000 crores push, and given the data center holidays, etc. So I think the right noises, the right directional push has been given by this budget. It is how about we capitalize and bring about process related and very sentiment related changes for FDI to really come in. I think there was some talk about process in the income tax holidays, but there is nothing much on the affordable housing. There was 80 IBA. I think they should bring it back because that used to give 100% exemption to profits. I think they didn't talk about that. Like Amit said, directionally, if you're able to strategy has been put in place. Directionally, you are right. It is all about putting in the nuances in terms of the tax incentives, in terms of the investment metrics that FDI would look at, and making it easier for people to come in. For example, you have got corridors. If you develop the corridors, then you need to also give incentives for people to develop around the corridors in terms of
Right.
it could be industrial logistics platform. They have also allocated a lot of money towards SME and funding of SMEs. So
Right.
the balancing doesn't happen only with real estate. If you're building different asset classes of real estate, you also need to bring about an infrastructure. It's like you pick up 2,000 hectares of place in Oragadam in Chennai or Kanjipuram district or Varanasi. Varanasi and Siliguri corridor, etc., and build on the way different infrastructure because you are trying to achieve three things. One is regional imbalances, moving people, then going there to work, and then also developing infrastructure and real estate around it. That's how the growth indicators are there. So my view is massive infra push sustains economic momentum and jobs, especially in
Right.
emerging cities. I'm saying all
Right.
these cities are emerging, and India is all about. Typically, we all the money comes in into Bombay, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai and Delhi, and then you stop. It's all about going into Lucknow, Varanasi, Kanpur,
Mm.
different Coimbatore, all these cities. If you go, it's amazing to see how these cities are developing. But then there is not enough infrastructure and real estate supporting
Yeah.
and not investment coming in. And the other important thing is real estate reforms unlock assets, enhance credit flow, and promote housing supply. Now, whether it is an industrial city, you still need hospitals, schools, everything to come out, which is infrastructure. So the infrastructure push is really good. But you have to also facilitate that to happen because state-wise and regional tier one, tier two
Correct.
cities wise.
Correct.
And
Correct.
also this urbanization focus, again, I feel is directionally good. But how are we going to implement it? Because you're saying, let me develop another 10 cities into urbanized, more urbanized.
Correct.
The
Correct.
urban focus actually fosters very balanced growth beyond metros. You have to
Correct.
think beyond metros now. Crowding
Yeah.
and then you have to crowd in private capital. For
Right.
example, I was with the defense secretary, last two ex-defense secretary, and we're talking about 2 lakh crores worth of money pumped into defense sector. And that's also part of the budget now, the expenditure. Now, end
Right.
of the day, that's because of the geopolitical things, India, make in India, sustainable India, indigenous India,
Yeah.
and we should be capable. All of this is also fostered into and brought in terms of growth, which means again
Correct.
infrastructure for people, etc. The
Correct.
negatives, I
Correct.
think, is execution risks in delay in large projects could blunt impact even with state capacity concerns. And plus,
Correct.
no real incentives for the domestic buyers today in terms of GST reform
Yeah.
or still the mid-income gaps unaddressed. These are the points that I think one should talk about along with the
Yeah,
FDI flow.
we'll come to the negatives later, but let's have the good news first. Pranit, Sridhar rightly mentioned that directional intention, everything is fine, but it's the execution that matters. The like God lies in detail. So there's a lot of detailing missing in this budget in terms of like when the tax holiday for GCC was mentioned, the quantum is not mentioned. Uh, the ministry-wise allocations have not been mentioned. From the taxation point of view, you mentioned that a lot of compliances have been made easier. How do you see that? The missing of detailing.
Actually, this time, unlike the last couple of years, the whole FM's speech has been very limited and very crisp. And she has left a lot of this deciphering by reading the blueprint left to the individuals to read up and analyze. But when I go through, I've had a chance to take a little cursory look at what the fine print says. But that seems to be encouraging. It's not something like what she said in the speech to what we are reading. There is some major devil that lies in the detail, and that is surprising us. So we are not seeing any surprises that I would be edgy about. So at least that has not happened. I'm pretty glad to see that there are no unpleasant surprises that one should be bothered about. It's quite a neat, steady write up that way in the fine print.
Taxation standpoint, what's the major announcement according to you in this budget for real estate?
I think the major announcement I would not think is anything significant. There is a major discussion with respect to data center and the tax holiday pertaining to data center. Of course, devil lies in the detail. But when I do go through the detail, and of course, a little more thinking needs to happen. But at the top level, my sense is that the exemption to data center and the income from data center is being given to a foreign entity. It's to the foreign company. And historically, there has been a litigation or at least a nervousness about these foreign entities who say provide cloud services, for example, or any AI related AI services. There has been that issue or that fear that am I as a foreign entity going to be taxable in India, and therefore should I expand my data center footprint, through my subsidiaries in India, and to that. With this exemption or this tax holiday that has been provided, which is for next 21 years, it's up to 2047, that gives a lot of certainty that to the foreign corporation that we are not here to, litigate you if you are going to provide your cloud or AI services using data centers in India. Now, there are some conditions to it. It needs to be a notified. So they need to be a notified foreign entity. We have to obtain that approval from the Indian tax authorities. But I think that's a matter of process. But overall, I don't believe that is creating some new growth opportunity. It is just providing more certainty that department does not want to litigate when it comes to a foreign entity's data center presence and data center related business activities in India.
Okay, fantastic. So fine print is not worrying Pranat Shah.
No.
Santosh, you would like to add something to it, the intent of the budget and the implementation of the budget. As I said, they are two different things, the execution part of it.
Yeah, Sapna, even if you look at previous budgets as well, there has been many schemes has been launched and many would have forgotten as well. You may not be remembering many of these because this has failed primarily because of the execution failure. And even in this budget, when you look at, around 5 years back, when the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister launched this, Sabke Liye Ghar, housing for all by 2030. Today, there was not even a single mention of that dialogue. What is going to happen? whether this affordable housing going to survive, whether the industry was expecting a clear definition of what is affordable housing. That was also not being announced, and there was not even a single focus
Right.
on that aspect. So yes, execution has been one of the concern issue. But having said that, Sapna, again, I think the impetus primarily on creating long-term assets, which is in a way of allocation to the large projects, big allocation to the defense or on the infrastructure side, on the this micro, what is it called, that chips,
Yeah, semiconductor.
Semiconductor.
semiconductors, so all these aspects which is going to give long-term result. We may be expecting a big game changer in this budget, but I do not think the current regime is focusing. Whatever the big game changer announcement has to be made, that has already been made last year, and which has really given impetus on the consumption side. Various schemes initiated by the government, which has really benefited from consumption aspect. But today's budget is primarily making sure that long-term vision of building a strong infrastructure for India, which has been established. And I think the government need to focus on execution, how the execution needs to be built. That should be the focus area for the next 3 or 4 years.
That's right. The steps have been given for the long-term growth. Now it is the execution. Ajay, there is also mention about committee on NBFCs and banking, and targets for disbursements, etc. How do you think this is going to be in favor of real estate? Is it going to help? How will it play out?
So I think largely, whatever has been said in terms of creating this committee for the fiscal financial institutions is largely again, I think, targeted towards the infrastructure growth and growth on social sectors, especially on the rural India side and on the eastern corridors. Basically, trying to see so that I think they want to ensure that there is a push that is coming from the committee to for more capital to travel into these investment areas, because we all agree most capital actually from any financial institution for any projects are largely concentrated in the top 8 cities, and anybody else from anywhere else try to raise capital, it becomes very difficult. So one of the key instruments the government actually has today is the public sector banks and the large NBFCs like power, the rural REC, the Rural Electrification Corporation,
PFC and REC.
PFCA, Power Finance Corporation, they've all said they'll be primarily restructured, and they will see how this will work. So I think that's what is happening. Just to understand this whole thing is, I think there's a lot of capacity building measures that they have taken, the government. But the bigger problem is the competency building, because so much capacity they're saying we're creating, but the one has to wonder where is the competency to absorb all this capacity, and what type of resources will come in to build that capacity. So that's the most critical question, because it's not just about the financial side. I'm talking about rare earth materials, right? We're talking about semiconductors. We're talking about so many things. We're going to put up clusters. We're going to put up economic corridors. At the end of the day is who is going to use them and how are we going to use them? These both have remained unanswered at largely right now. I hope as the year progresses, the government will put this entire strategy in place, to take forward this capacity building measure that they have been talking about.
Right, right. So I'm sure a lot of things will unfold in coming months and days. Abhijit, there is government has also given simplified NRI's property transaction laws, TCS on foreign travel and education, etc. How do you think this is going to impact investments and probably even the property in the real estate?
I think one is that it's important for an NRI when they purchase to be able to sell and transact. Now, it was becoming onerous for NRIs to sell because of the duality of PAN and TAN, which for individual purchasers becomes very difficult. Removing the duality and making it only a PAN based deduction on sale makes it a much simplified way of for an NRI to actually invest, hold property, and eventually sell and exit. So I think that simplification is a good idea. I think there is an enhanced need for further simplifying the entire flow of NRI capital. We already have been given through Gift City, and I think that was one of the bigger missing points because Gift City has been in a lot of
Hmm.
focus in the last two
Hmm.
budgets as to how capital formation for global investors can happen in a very tax efficient or tax neutral way through Gift City, wherein NRIs were allowed to bring in capital under the FPI regime to India without going through the NRE, NRO, or other accounts. Now, that was a very great opportunity and it enhanced the ability for NRIs to actually pool money into India through the Gift City channel. I think the rationalization, therefore, of taxes for NRI and for the India diaspora in general, I think is very important. This is just one step in the right direction, but a very small one at that, because the amount of money sitting abroad, which is actually getting remitted to various banks of Gujarat, Kerala, and other states, is absolutely unbelievable. The biggest fear factor is that any investment, therefore, is very onerous in taxation, and that makes it limited in its ability to get employed within the Indian opportunity set. Once you have a pass-through status, also the way you've given for foreign investors who are only allowed a small withholding tax or a long-term capital gain tax after 1 year for listed or after 2 years for unlisted, makes it very, very efficient. Providing the same status for Indian diaspora is equally important to attract that huge capital which is naturally looking to come to India. You don't really have to woo them.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's a natural destination, it's sitting in the banks. I think that's one thing which is a step in the right direction, giving a directional momentum, like we've been talking in general. Directionally, we are going the right way,
Hmm.
but there are larger things, larger nuances to tap the entire global capital pool, which still needs to be effectuated. We've also seen inefficiencies when it comes to public spending. We're talking about 12.3 lakh crores being allocated for the development of infra. But having said that, you may not be aware or aware that 8,000 crores allocated a couple of years ago to develop 5 cities lie unutilized. So the devil obviously lies in execution. So now suddenly you have budgetary allocations for urbanization, but applicability and time frame is, I think, even more important. Uh, in terms of TCS, that's the next question. Reducing TCS is very important as well because at the end of the day, you are asking for foreign asset disclosures and foreign income disclosures, which is perfect. Now, if you allow capital to also grow globally through lower withholding tax, you are anyway asking it to eventually come back with returns.
Hmm.
So I think having a lower TCS on outward remittances is absolutely a must. The limits are anyway very, very constrained. Now, you may have an issue with dollar outflow, but having said that, global opportunities are best tapped by Indians who know how to multiply the capital in global markets and bring it back. And that is the best way to actually, and then they bring it back. They're bringing not just their money, but they're bringing another friend's money back with them. So I think it's important to create an ecosystem where our money can go out, it can actually multiply, and that can go out only when the incidence of TCS itself is lower. When you talk about tourism, tourism actually doesn't only mean tourism, it means actually a lot of business. MICE events is also included under tourism. When I'm going to
Correct.
create a business conclave offshore and I'm attracting global capital and you're going to tax me at source at a higher slab today, my incentive to go out and solicit business or create exhibitions and come back becomes smaller. Now that leaves more capital in my hands to actually accelerate that by lowering TCS. So I think again directionally the right thing, but again a lot more work to be done in that space to bring that capital back in a multiple way. So I think NRI money or global diaspora money is a very large source of capital. Earlier, Pravasi Bharatiya Divas was such a big event. Of course, it's lost its sheen over the years, but I think Indian diaspora today has a greater interest and excitement and opportunity to come back India than it ever was. I think that is a very important theme, and that is a large source of capital that must be addressed through tax ops and policy changes. So I think just to bring that into focus is a great idea. Having said that, again, ownership of assets here should be liberated. Why only have one home or two homes or three homes? Why not have as many properties as you wish to buy? There is a certain limitation on NRIs on what they can actually purchase and hold in their names. I think that cap needs to be done away with. You need to create, there's no mention of rental housing. How do you create rental
Yeah.
housing stock? That can only happen when somebody has to buy it or create it. There is no incentive left or given in rental housing as an asset class. So directionally, we are pushing only only enterprise scale development. They're pushing only institutional scale development. And this budget has only given an impetus for industrial led developments, whether it's plug and play facilities, logistic led developments, whether it comes to manufacturing facilities in pharma, energy, EV, and other allied ecosystems, or even maybe work housing, etc., could develop around that. But when you look at the larger urban infrastructure development and mainstream consumption of asset classes, it can also be done at a semi-institutional level or retail level, with investors being allowed to come and hold in bulk. That does not
Correct.
create any bubbles because it is purely for the purpose of renting and for the purpose of capital appreciation. We talk about geopolitical risk globally. India is still a safer haven. It is still keeping a neutral stance by not being part of either of the blocks. One is keeping a neutral view on how growth has to be implemented without getting drawn into any particular viewpoint or polarization. I think that is a great ability that India has in the recent time been able to maintain. To do
Right.
that, must be able to bring that capital and accelerate that. So there are certain
Correct.
good first step. Now you need to unshackle it further.
Okay, unshackle it further. Enterprise-led development, institutional-led development is what Amit Goenka ji is saying this budget is all about. So let me ask all my experts here, is this budget an Aam Aadmi budget? Ashwinder ji, is this Aam Aadmi budget?
I think you're asking me a very tough question, Sapna.
It has to be to you. Who else to answer the toughest
Because it
question?
all boils down to the people, the common people, the home buyers. So is it for
See,
them?
I think what Amit said, I completely agree that this is a industry-led, technology-led, manufacturing-led budget. Somewhere the real estate fraternity is a little perturbed or disturbed because looks like real estate has not been addressed directly. Another point which I want to conclude, Sapna, which is very important, is what Santosh picked. Very important that for the last 3 years, the growth of affordable housing is lesser than premium and luxury housing. I'm
Right.
not talking about actual sales. I'm talking about the growth in the sector. It is very
Right.
disturbing because nobody, nobody, no developer is getting into affordable housing when I talk of the top 7 cities. The affordability, one is the definition of affordability, the other is the reality of affordability. We keep on saying, this much square feet is affordable, this much is not affordable, but we are forgetting that affordable housing in India still should be a two-bedroom home that somebody can buy it for 50 lakhs. Now, let me give you a perspective, Sapna. In Raipur, a two-bedroom apartment of a developer is not less than 1 crore. Raipur is in Chhattisgarh. After Adani went to Raipur and is expanding on the manufacturing side and on the mining side, you cannot get a two-bedroom apartment in Bhilai or Raipur for less than 1 crores. So there, if at all something needs to be done for the Aam Aadmi, and why I'm coming back to affordable, because somebody has to bell the cat,
Right.
and it is very difficult to bell the cat because the cat is very fierce. So the point is that affordable housing needs a separate policy. And it needs to be a pan India policy where we need affordable housing zones like we have an SEZ. Why don't we create affordable housing zone in public private partnership where the land gets subsidized, profitability also has a particular margin. You say that your two-bedroom has to be minimum of this side, cannot be more than this much of price, and in this particular zone we will only have affordable housing, and we create an integrated kind of a township for affordable housing where you have a small shopping center, medical facility, schools, metro connectivity, and so on and so forth, because land is going to be an important part. And because land is very expensive, you will have to move away from the main cities. You will have
Right.
to create affordable housing corridors.
Correct.
And that is something that it is not about the affordable housing definition or giving. I was just thinking, I would have said myself that give tax break to people on affordable housing, give subsidy on affordable housing. But for that, you need a proper policy which cuts across through the nation.
Hmm.
And that is the only way the Aam Aadmi can be helped. And that is where housing for all came.
Hmm.
Housing for India, see, India lacks scale.
Right.
We still cannot make 50,000 homes in affordable housing in one go. India makes two aircrafts in a year. America makes 5,000 aircrafts in a year. That is the level of scale that people operate on. Look at the scale at which China operates. So we just don't lack. Our challenges are capital, our challenge is scale. We have the will. The government is very pro India now, and with the geopolitical scenario, the government wants India to realize its true potential and
Correct. Correct.
start growing within. And for that, something like this, which is a maybe an affordable housing policy, has to be done at an emergency level for the Aam Aadmi to be addressed, rather than giving incentives and sops, etc., which people
Hmm.
forget after a month.
Right, right. Very correct. Why not have a policy? Why not have a affordable housing corridor, capital scale? And if we want to make it an Aam Aadmi budget, affordable housing is the
And
prerequisite.
maybe
But in
get, that is where, like what Amit said,
hmm,
that is where you might be able to attract huge foreign capital also, because
correct,
there is a clear cut value proposition that you can offer people. See,
correct.
affordable housing में सबसे अच्छी बात ये होती है सपना, the risk is less because you know it will sell if the product is good.
Yeah. There is a huge latent demand for that. So you will
Yes,
never fall
people,
short of buyers.
yes,
I think
people need a home.
definitions, I mean, policy, yes, is a good idea, but when you're defining economic corridors, when you're defining a corridor for rail, for road infra, for electrical and other installations, defining such zones for the purpose of affordable housing becomes a natural impetus to growth, because I can set up industrial banks, but then if I do not find the requisite workforce around that, that becomes a limiting factor for the propagation of that asset class. Like Ashwinda rightly pointed out, you are going out and putting out industries in Bhilai or in Raipur in other parts of the country, but then you do not have the workforce who can actually go and afford or rent it, then it becomes a limitation of capacity for further growth beyond that point. So I think it's a tandem approach to growth and industrialization is creating livable spaces for work forces to actually go and operate out of there. And of course, along with that, the entire Skill India, which was a very important imperative for the government and for the union, also seems to have got no mention. I think creating capacity or make in India or becoming self-resilient, which seems to be the Atmanirbhar or the developed India 2047 vision, cannot be without the development of skill, and therefore there needs to be continuous allotment of capital for the purpose of skilling and reskilling. Given on the backdrop of AI and ML and other technological interventions with data center getting such large focus, how do you reskill our workforce to meet that impending demand? And that, of course, there has to be infrastructure which must be also created to create that opportunity. So I think there has to be allied expenditure on the public side, which will actually motivate the development of these asset classes, not just the outlay of roads and rails, which is obviously very important, and which also dovetails into Ashwinder's point for affordable housing. But then there are other allied things which include skilling and re-education, which needs to
Correct,
be
correct.
brought in. Healthcare through Ayush has found flavor, but there's no clear budgetary outlay as to really what healthcare means for the country and what Ayush will do, and what is it that is going into the national healthcare insurance policy. And if there is no clear directional on that, how do you actually ensure continuity of the workforce? I think that's the other important part, along with the food security. opportunity. So I think there are certain allied areas which also need to be expanded upon, which will create a continuity of development of asset classes in some of these locations. Clearly, the need for urbanization with direction. We started with smart cities as a direction. Now we move to certain economic zones and belts and certain cities which need to get developed, or maybe corridors which need to get developed. But it has to be on the back of creating that allied private infra also along with it, which will need a certain amount of state level benefits. So we will still need to see how that will get dovetailed between state and center.
Okay, so, like you said, we earlier, the focus was smart cities, now economic corridors. Santosh said housing for all was not, it's been forgotten or it's not been mentioned, or is it on a back burner? We don't know. So, clearly, I think reading the room, it's not so much of Aam Aadmi budget. But if we have spoken so much about investment and bringing in capacity building, uh, for how do you see this budget improving the risk return equation? Because they again, government has given some, even like Pranat said, they have eased some compliances, etc. So how do you see this risk return equation for Indian real estate from domestic and foreign investor point of view? Starting with you, Pranat, your just a short note on that.
So from a foreign investor perspective, if I limit myself to real estate, I don't think the budget has made many. It's fairly neutral, is what I would feel. But on infrastructure, there is still some play. I can see some capital coming, foreign capital into infrastructure. Limited to real estate, it's fairly neutral.
Okay, so for real estate, the risk return equation after going through this budget is neutral. For infrastructure.
Yeah,
Still
it should not
better.
change much. Yeah,
It should not change. Sridhar, what do you have to say? How is this playing out for the investors? You're on mute.
Thank you, Sapna. I think the key point that I was trying to say is that in this budget, we talked about directional, we talked about strategy, we talked about FDI, FPI. Amit has been very vocal about capital coming in, etc., not coming in. There has been directionally some changes in FPI. Pranat mentioned about also those tax, the TCS benefit, etc. All of this are, but what from a real estate infrastructure point of view, I think is key mechanism for supply boost has been done. So infrastructure development, there has been an allocation. I'm sure this allocation, even if it's utilized 50% and being utilized to develop, will have its impact on real estate, the affordable housing concept, setting up of industries. So supply boost has happened. Asset monetization is also happened because they talked about recycling CPSC real estate assets into REIT. And I think also they encouraged in tier one, tier two and tier three cities to make it more affordable. Then there are infra synergies will also bring in adequate amount of C. So from a risk reward perspective for a developer, what I think is supply growth is likely to accelerate modestly via private investment. But the persistent gaps that you see in GST rationalization or the direct tax incentives, that may sort of reduce this margin. So developers will anticipate, I think I expect 10-20% more launches if viability improves, because they'll be focusing still on PMAY units for affordable housing, because that is where that 79,000 crores, I mean, they're continuing with it. It's an overall positive momentum, but not a transformative without follow-on reforms. That's my view. You have to
Okay,
follow on with the reforms to make it transformative.
correct. Santosh, do you think this budget has improved the risk return equation for investors, for developers?
I think so, yeah, Sapna. If you look at the total announcement made by the finance minister, there are 10 areas where it will have an impact on the real estate. Be it is re-innovation of industrial corridors, which was set up many years back. There are 200 such industrial parks which will get refurbishment or creation of additional infrastructure in those. And then there are, from a finance point of view, even they have created infrastructure risk guarantee fund, which has been proposed, which will also have an impact on the long-term capital for infrastructure as well as for the commercial real estate. So there are a few initiatives which has been announced by the finance minister, and also there is a corporate bond which is primarily to go deep into the market fluctuations, and also the reforms in the banking sector, which has been announced by the finance minister, will have a long term impact. But I think risk return ratio, I don't think it will have so much of risk when we are looking at long term vision of the government.
Okay, fantastic. So, no drastic
I would like to add to
changes or
now to this
improvements. Yeah,
question
Amitji.
to
Yeah.
understand two things. First is risk return. It comes with the incidence of tax. When your buyback tax, which has been changed from maximum marginal tax rate to capital gains, I think it actually improves the ability for an investor to come in into equity and get bought back by the promoter or by the company. I think that's a very important change because the incidence of that was almost amounting to double taxation in the hands of the company as well as in the hands of the investor. So having a single capital gains tax regime is actually a little more simplified way of actually allowing equity participation into projects on a risk adjusted basis. I think the second is the entry point. Today, when you're going into development assets, you are looking at certain zones which are obviously in the periphery of cities, which do not have a very clear master plan because those are
Mm.
not urbanized yet. Now, when you have urbanization roadmaps and when you start creating roadmaps where you have urban centers allocated, then the land titling and the developmental roadmap becomes very clear. So the risk is reduced for that. So I'm going in the outskirts of Pune, I'm going in the outskirts of Mumbai, I'm going towards beyond Taloja, I'm going beyond even, so when I'm going around certain corridors, I realize that there is a certain issue when it comes to land titling and definitely the development norms because they're not created into earth. I'm still, for example, in Maharashtra working with Satbara, not with property cards, which means that there's a very cumbersome process to convert it from agri to non-agri, then go into the development and get it approved for development. Now, when you have a master plan which allows that, it makes it very simple. So now bringing down risk, I'm still keeping that opportunity impact. So I think these two factors would, in addition to what Santosh and Sridhar mentioned, are very important from a capital allocation and partnership and risk reward. So I'm now better incentivized to do that than I was earlier.
Yeah.
No, there
Just
is an improvement. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
no, just to add to what
Yeah.
Amit has mentioned, if you look at the announcement, there are, I think, 346 legal laws which has been abolished, which was
Yes.
keeping nuances to the policy reforms. It has been removed. Yes, there are certain risks like Amit mentioned. There are land title risk, environment clearance risk, which is becoming big challenge for many of the infrastructure and real estate projects to be get implemented on time and getting the various approval. Look at Karnataka today, getting the e-Khata for any land related title. It's becoming a big issue and it's taking a lot of time. So these kind of reforms definitely takes time, but with the progress has been made so rapidly and significantly, I am sure with the progress of time, we'll see more risk aversing decisions coming from the government side as well.
Fantastic. So I think the speakers say the steps taken in this budget are in the right direction. Now we have to see the execution, the implementation, and if there is some time frame or if we can expedite, because once some project happens, it takes time to have a the domino effect on the real estate. So
I just, Sapna, have one point concluding
mm,
because a lot of things were common, Santosh, Amit, everybody. I think even if we get next 10 budgets and real estate is not represented, it is fine because there is already a lot that has been announced. And if that can be the focus for execution, whether just coming back to affordable housing, how it has completely lost momentum in the last 3 4 years, and we were talking of housing for all by 2030, and we are
right.
talking of Viksit Bharat by 2047, and a developed economy is an economy where everybody has home, everybody has food, everybody has a job. When that happens, you become a developed economy or a developed country. That is why, let's take very basic example of any. So my point is, I think we should change the narrative as industry leaders, and you people play a very big role, Sapna, in that, bringing all of us together. Is that let us focus on kind of doing some policy advocacy and work around getting things executed and
Correct.
bringing a far more stronger public private partnership into it, where developers, channel partners, tax advisors, AIFs all come together in partnership for their respective roles with the government and start focusing on certain things which start moving.
Correct. I
Because
think we
the
have all
next
of you
budget,
together here
yeah, because
to start this.
next budget might be great for real estate, and we might have 10 things, and we will say, wow, excellent. So many things have been given to real estate. These discussions will happen and things will get over. But the point is, even if we can pick up one or two big items which give you the 80-20 needle moving, if affordable housing is cracked in India, let me tell you, this industry will flourish for the next 2 decades. Everybody will have business, banks, financial companies, funds, developers, channel partners, IPCs, consultants, everyone. I think
Right.
that is the biggest item that we should really hope that we get something there.
Collaboration, execution, and cracking the affordable housing code is what Ashwinder ji is saying. So let's wrap up this discussion with a rapid fire. So let me ask you, what is the net impact of this budget on real estate? Positive, neutral, or cautious? Santosh, what will you pick?
I'm very positive. Again, as I said, this will have a long-term benefit. These policy changes will take some time, certain times.
Okay.
I'm very optimistic about the real estate going forward.
Positive. Okay, great. So Santosh is very positive on the impact of this budget. Ajay, what do you say? Positive, neutral, or cautious?
So I'm going to take a neutral stance, is primarily because, like we've all been speaking, it's all about a lot of big announcements have been done, but we also need to create the demand. So where's the demand going to come from? So the entire idea. So we've been talking about capital movement, we have been talking about infrastructure, we have been talking
Right.
about benefits for corporates, non-corporates. But by the end of the day, the consumer should have money in his hand to go and buy something, right? So
Okay.
demand creation is extremely important. Today we have talked about the capacity building. That's what I was saying. The capacity building has been done. I think now the government should take a lot of movement towards creating the demand, which they have initiated with some upskilling related programs that they've
Right.
spoken, at least in the healthcare sector, where 1.5 lakh jobs are going to get created. So hopefully, all these things, and that's a big impetus, in fact, for senior care living, because in senior care living, usually we have a problem of operators not having skilled people taking
Right.
our elders. So this could open up that sector. So something like this is very, very critical, and
Correct.
we want to see the finer details to be absolutely sure that's where we are progressing.
Okay. So
That
Ajay's
gets us
stance
back.
is neutral because capacity building is taken care of, but demand generation is yet to be taken care of. Dr. Amit Goenka, what is your stance on the impact of this budget on real estate? Positive, neutral, or cautious?
I would give it one thumbs up, not two thumbs up,
Okay.
because I am an urban infrastructure player and not just specific to real estate. I think it's a larger landscape for urbanization, which is required. If you do not have that footprint, the pressure on 6 or 8 cities is already enormous, will continue to be enormous. The buying capacity resides in the non-metros, in the tier two, tier three locations. That is where our push is. And from that perspective, it is one thumbs up, but not two thumbs up.
Okay. So I say cautiously positive. Ashwinder ji, positive, cautious, or neutral stance on this budget for real estate?
No, I think I'll be positive only because because how can we people be neutral or negative? We have to be positive about real estate because only positive people get into real estate. My guru Santosh is sitting here. You can't be in real estate. Ask Amit, ask Ajay, ask Prinod, Sridharji. Real estate developer is the most optimistic and the most strong species in this world. There can be 2008, there can be COVID, there can be so many times The obituary of real estate promoters, developers, professionals have been written, and but this species bounces back. It is a very important cog in the wheel. 10% of GDP contribution, mota moti, going up to 12, 13%. We have to be positive. It is positive. Let's make the best of what we have and focus on execution.
Okay, fantastic. So developers, so real estate players are all positive species. Pranat, still for formality's sake, let me ask you, what is your assessment of net impact of this budget? Positive, neutral, cautious, negative?
See, all the biggies over here have said what they have to say. Actually, I'll be the most irrelevant in the whole crowd. But I will dare to say, if I'm allowed to split hair, on the infrastructure side, I do feel a little positive. On the pure real estate side, I feel neutral. And if I overlay tax on it, which is what my forte is, if I overlay tax, then I feel there are certain things which, were expectations of the industry that budget should have made, like in terms of tax credits, the GST credit on construction contracts, especially where you have GCCs and data centers involved. That puts some pressure on growth of this real estate space on the commercial side. So
Okay.
overall, real estate neutral, infrastructure marginally positive.
See,
Okay.
just on a
Okay.
lighter note, like real estate people are trained to be positive. I would have been worried if Prinut was positive because he's a trained auditor, and auditors
Auditors.
can't auditors, if they become positive, there is a problem. There is conflict of interest.
Okay. So, Mr. Sridhar, last word to you. How do you see budget impact? Positive, negative, neutral, cautious, after hearing all the other experts?
I think Pranath, even though he was an auditor, to be on the, he spelled it out correctly. I think the positives are massive infra push, sustains economic momentum and jobs, especially in emerging cities. The real estate reforms like the CPSC, Tier 1, Tier 2, REITs, unlocks assets and enhances credit flow, and also promotes affordable housing supply given the development of corridors. And the urbanization focus leads to balanced growth beyond metros. So these are the positives. On the negatives, I would like to say execution risk, like delays in large projects, could blunt the impact among the concerns that has been already discussed. Then there has been no major tax incentives for home buyers or GST reforms, especially when you do leasing or etc. commercial real estate. The GST credit input has this has been long been lobbied on and still not come through, leaving mid-income demand gaps unaddressed. Then there is also fiscal pressure overall from a budget point of view from high capex that may limit the broader relief that the intentions are there. So these are the three, and it may also create sectoral imbalances given how we are progressing on different asset classes. So these are the three positives and three negatives I thought broadly that could come to my mind. So I would be cautiously positive, and
Okay.
I'll not be neutral. I'll be cautiously positive because I think directionally the budget has laid down a lot of roadmap in terms of moving towards things, and it's also about how we execute, as we have already debated, beaten it down in this discussion. That will make it from
Okay.
cautiously positive to positive.
Okay, so mixed reactions. Most of people are positive here, our speakers, and some are neutral and some are cautiously positive. But we like to give marks. We like to do report card. So out of five, what all you would like to mark this budget as? Ashwinder ji, first of all, what is your marks for this budget out of five? Ashwinder ji, so Amit. In the meantime, if you can give your rating out of
So I
five for
would,
this budget,
I would give a 3.5.
3.5. Ajay?
So I'm giving it a 2.5, right? Split in the middle.
Okay, so Santosh?
I'll give 3. 3 by 5.
Okay, okay, not bad. Pranat?
3.
3, okay. And Sridhar?
3.
Okay. Ashwinderji, are you there?
He's the most
Okay.
positive person, so let's put 5 for him.
Yeah,
Five.
of course, 5.
Okay, so
Then you can
not
average it
bad.
out.
Yeah, it
Okay.
will. But I think, very rightly said, the entire sentiments that we have got out from this discussion is that directionally, this budget is in the right direction. Intentions are right. The impact has to be seen. How it happens, as everyone said, devil lies in the details. So how the execution happens, how the detailing comes out over the next few months is what is going to decide the impact of this budget. So thank you everyone for sharing your time with us today, and for those sharp insights that you shared with us, with that very focused lens on real estate. So thank you for being part of this discussion with Realty Plus. Thank you, Santosh. Thank you,
Thank you.
Ajay. Thank
Mhm.
you,
Thank you.
Amit.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Pranat.
Thank
Thank you,
you all.
Sridhar.
Nice
And
Thanks,
thank
talking
you,
to
Ajay.
you.
Ashwinderji, everyone. Thank you so much
All right.
for being part of this
Thank you,
conversation.
Sapna. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Reality
Thank you,
Plus.
Swapna.
Thanks, Sapna, for
Thank you,
asking some
Sapna.
difficult questions.